Margaret Hayes stood at her kitchen window, watching the morning sun paint golden strokes across 40 acres. She'd worked since she was barely 25. Her hands, weathered but still strong at 65, trembled slightly as she held her coffee cup. 40 years. 40 years of early mornings and late nights. 40 years of planting hope and harvesting dreams. She thought of Robert, her late husband, gone 5 years now. How they'd built this farm from nothing but love and determination. How they'd raised their son, Daniel, teaching him the value of honest work and family loyalty. The memory brings both sweetness and sorrow. Daniel had taken over much of the farm work in recent years. At 38, he was capable and strong, married to Christina for nearly 8 years now. Margaret had welcomed Christina warmly, treating her like the daughter she'd never had. But something had shifted. Last Tuesday evening, Margaret overheard them talking in the barn. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but their voices carried through the autumn air. "This is our property now, Christina." Daniel's voice held an edge she'd never heard before. "We've earned it. Your mother still thinks she runs everything," Christina replied, her tone sharp with impatience. "We're planning our anniversary celebration here, whether she likes it or not. It's our farm." Margaret's heart cracked like old pottery. "Our farm, our property, not the family farm, not your mother's life work. Theirs." Margaret stood, frozen behind the barn door, her chest tight with disbelief. She'd noticed their whispered conversations lately, the way they'd measure rooms with their eyes, making plans she wasn't part of. The wedding anniversary party was news to her. They'd invited 50 guests to celebrate on her farm without a single word of consultation. That night, Margaret barely slept. She lay in the room she'd shared with Robert, staring at the ceiling, feeling something she'd never expected to feel in her own home. Invisible, erased. But Margaret Hayes was not a woman to crumble. By morning, she'd made her decision with a calm clarity that surprised even herself. She dressed carefully, put on her pearl earrings, the ones Robert gave her on their 25th anniversary, and made 3 phone calls. The first was to Sterling Events, a prestigious event planning company in town. "I'd like to book an event for next Saturday," she said softly. "Something elegant. Use of my property for the entire day." "Certainly, Mrs. Hayes. We'll send our team to evaluate the space and begin preparations immediately." The second call was to her lawyer, Martin Crawford, a family friend for 30 years. "Martin, I need to discuss some property arrangements." Time moved like honey through sunlight. Daniel and Christina spent the week preparing for their anniversary celebration, oblivious to the quiet storm gathering. They ordered tables and decorations, arranged catering, sent invitations to friends and family. Margaret watched them, saying nothing. She moved through the farmhouse like a gentle ghost, smiling when they spoke to her, retreating when they didn't. On Friday afternoon, a convoy of trucks arrived bearing the logo of Sterling Events. Professional staff emerged, carrying elegant equipment and supplies. Daniel rushed out from the equipment shed, confusion written across his face. "Mom, what's going on?" Margaret stood on the front porch, composed and radiant in her burgundy dress, her diamond necklace catching the light. "I've rented the farm to Sterling Events for tomorrow," she said calmly. "They're hosting a corporate retreat. The contract is legally binding." The world tilted on its axis. Christina appeared, her face flushed with anger. "You can't do this. Our party is tomorrow." "Your party," Margaret repeated softly. "That you planned on my property without asking me. My farm, my decision." Daniel's expression shifted between shock and guilt. "Mom, we were going to tell you. You called it your property, Daniel." Margaret's voice remained steady, though her eyes glistened. "You planned your celebration as if I didn't exist. As if 40 years of my life, your father's life, meant nothing." Truth settled like autumn leaves. The Sterling Events coordinator approached diplomatically. "Mrs. Hayes, we're set to begin setup. We have full legal access for the next 24 hours. Margaret nodded. She turned to her son and daughter-in-law, her heart breaking even as she stood firm. "I raised you to respect what others build through sacrifice and love. I welcomed Christina into our family with open arms. but respect is a two-way road, and I will not be invisible in my own home. Christina started to protest, but Daniel placed a hand on her arm. Something in his mother's expression, the quiet dignity, the pain she couldn't quite hide, finally reached him. Recognition blooms even in winter. We were wrong, he said quietly, the words catching in his throat. Mom, we were so wrong. The event staff worked efficiently around them as the family stood in uncomfortable silence. Margaret excused herself, retreating to her bedroom while strangers transformed her farm into something unrecognizable. She sat on the edge of her bed, holding a photograph of Robert, tears finally falling. Did I do the right thing? She whispered to his image. Sometimes love requires boundaries. That evening, as the event company finished their preparations, Daniel knocked softly on her door. Mom, can we talk? Margaret opened the door to find both Daniel and Christina standing there. Christina's eyes were red, her usual confidence replaced with something that looked like genuine remorse. We canceled everything, Daniel said. Called all the guests, apologized to the caterers. We'll celebrate somewhere else, or not at all. Christina stepped forward, her voice trembling. Mrs. Hayes, Margaret, I'm sorry. We got caught up in our own lives, our own plans. We forgot whose shoulders we were standing on. Forgiveness is not weakness, it's the hardest strength. Margaret studied them both, seeing their younger selves. Daniel at 7, helping his father fix the fence. Christina on their wedding day, promising to honor family. People stumble. People forget. But people can also remember. Sit with me, Margaret said gently. They sat together in the living room where Robert once read bedtime stories, where Christmas mornings unfolded, where life had happened in all its messy beauty. This farm, Margaret began, was never just about land or property. It was about building something bigger than ourselves. Your father and I wanted to create a legacy of love and hard work for you, Daniel. For your children something. I know, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. And I dishonored that. We dishonored that. Truth-telling heals what? Hiding breaks. They talked for hours. About expectations and assumptions. About communication and respect. About the difference between inheriting something and earning it. Christina admitted feeling pressure to prove herself, to stake her claim in a family that sometimes still felt like it belonged to ghosts. Daniel confessed that taking over farm responsibilities had made him feel entitled to ownership before its time. But it's not about time, Margaret said softly. It's about how we treat each other in the time we have. The next morning brought unexpected grace. The corporate retreat proceeded as planned. Margaret watched from her window as executives participated in team-building exercises among the fields Robert had tended, the barn they built together. The rental fee was substantial. That afternoon, Margaret called Daniel and Christina to the kitchen table. I've been thinking, she said, sliding papers across the worn wooden surface. This farm will be yours someday, but perhaps it's time to make you partners now legally and officially. Their eyes widened as they read the documents Martin Crawford had prepared. Equal partnership, Margaret continued. We make decisions together. We respect each other's perspectives. We honor what was built while building something new. And sometimes, we get second chances. Daniel embraced his mother, this woman who'd taught him everything he knew about perseverance and dignity. Christina joined them, 3 people trying to find their way back to trust. But, Margaret added with a gentle smile, we communicate about everything, even anniversary parties. They laughed together, the sound filling the kitchen with something that felt like healing. 3 months later, they held a proper celebration, not just for Daniel and Christina's anniversary, but for the farm itself, a gathering that honored 40 years of labor and love, that welcomed the next chapter while respecting what came before. The land remembers everything. Margaret stood among her family and friends, wearing her pearls and burgundy dress, feeling Robert's presence in the wind that rustled through the harvest fields. She'd learned something profound in her 65 years, that protecting your boundaries isn't cruelty, it's self-respect. That forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but choosing growth over grudges. and most importantly, that sometimes the kindest thing we can do is refuse to disappear. The farm still stands, golden in the autumn light, holding stories of betrayal, transformed into understanding, anger refined into wisdom, a family that stumbled but learned to walk together again. Because some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight is with the people we love most, especially then.